My grandfather was not a rich man, but he was the wealthiest soul I ever knew. He wore simple clothes, spoke in a gentle tone, and walked with a calmness that made the world around him seem less chaotic. His life was not one filled with fanfare or grand achievements in the eyes of the world. But within the walls of our home, he was a giant, a lighthouse, a living book of wisdom. His hands were rough from labor, yet they were the same hands that gently held my childhood, taught me to tie my shoes, wipe my tears, and shape the foundation of my character. I used to sit by his side for hours, captivated not by action or noise, but by silence and his slow, deliberate way of speaking. Every word he spoke came from a place of experience, pain, joy, and reflection. One of the first lessons he taught me was this: never confuse noise with progress. He said the world is full of people running in circles, mistaking movement for growth, action for meaning. Don't just be busy, he'd say, be intentional. I didn't understand it at the time. As a young man, I thought movement meant success. But over time, I saw how he moved with purpose, how every action he took had a direction, a destination, a reason. He once told me that the strongest trees are those that take the longest to grow because their roots run deep. This stayed with me. Whenever life demanded immediate results, when impatience threatened to poison my journey, I remembered his words and steadied myself. My grandfather woke up before the sun, not because someone told him to, but because he believed the first hours of the day were the most sacred. The world is quiet then, he said, and in the silence, you'll hear the whispers of your soul. He would sit by the window with a cup of tea and listen, not to the radio or a phone, but to the wind, the birds, the breath of life. The world speaks, he told me, but you have to be still enough to hear it. He had lost much in life. His father at a young age, a child who died in infancy, and dreams that never materialized. But he carried his grief like a stone polished over time. Pain is a teacher, he'd say. Don't run from it. Let it shape you, not shatter you. This lesson was not philosophical for him. It was real. I saw him mourn, but I never saw him broken. I saw tears in his eyes, but never despair in his soul. He showed me that strength is not the absence of sorrow, but the ability to walk through it with dignity. When I failed my exams in school, I thought I was worthless. I was ashamed to face my family, but my grandfather called me outside, sat beside me, and looked at the sky. Look at the stars, he said. They don't stop shining because a few clouds pass. Why should you? That moment marked a turning point. He didn't lecture me about studying harder or being responsible. He reminded me of my worth, my light, and my place in the universe. Another time when I lost a friend to betrayal, I was filled with rage and bitterness. I wanted revenge. My grandfather listened to my anger without interruption. Then he said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. He taught me that forgiveness was not for the weak, but for the wise. Let go not because they deserve peace, but because you do. He believed in doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Integrity, he said, is how you behave when the spotlight is gone. He once returned a lost wallet with a large sum of money, even though we were struggling financially. When I asked him why, he simply said, because it's not mine, and keeping it would cost me more than it would gain. He didn't need applause. His conscience was his reward. Every Sunday, he visited the grave of his wife. He would bring flowers, clean the tombstone, and sit beside her, sometimes in silence, sometimes speaking softly. It was love beyond time. Love, he told me, is not proven in moments of joy. It's tested in years of endurance. He was not afraid to show emotion. He cried when he missed her, laughed when he remembered her, and carried her memory like a treasure no one could steal. He taught me to express love openly, to say what I feel, and to never assume people know unless I tell them. One day, he said, you'll regret the words you didn't say more than the ones you did. He had a small garden where he grew vegetables and flowers. He treated it like a sacred space. Nature teaches patience, he'd say. You water, you wait, and you trust. That garden was his sanctuary. He once made me plant a tree and care for it. It didn't grow for weeks, and I wanted to give up. But he told me, Growth is not always visible. That doesn't mean it's not happening. Years later, that tree became the tallest in our yard, and it reminded me daily that perseverance is often rewarded in silence. When he spoke of money, he didn't preach wealth. He preached wisdom. Earn honestly, he said. Spend wisely, give generously. He never had much, but he was never poor. He shared what he had, believed in community, and trusted that what you give returns in ways beyond currency. He said, "Riches that live in your heart cannot be taxed or stolen." My grandfather lived through wars, economic crises, and personal tragedies, but he never let circumstances define his spirit. He taught me resilience by showing me how to rise, again and again, without complaint. He believed in gratitude. Every breath, he said, is a gift. Don't waste it complaining. When I got my first job and felt the thrill of independence, he said, "Now the real test begins. Power reveals character." He warned me not to let success make me arrogant or failure make me bitter. "Stay humble when you rise," he said, "and hopeful when you fall." One day I found him staring at an old photograph of his childhood. He looked lost in thought. "Do you miss those days?" I asked. He smiled and replied, "I cherish them, but I don't live there anymore. Life is about looking forward with the lessons of the past, not the regrets." That taught me the difference between nostalgia and stagnation. He encouraged memories but warned against being trapped by them. As he aged, his steps slowed, his hands trembled, and his memory faded. But his wisdom never dimmed. Even in his last days, he would whisper truths that sank deep into my soul. One of the last things he told me was this: "We are all just stories in the end. Make yours worth telling." When he passed, it felt like a library had burned down. But the books, the lessons, the quotes, he had already written them in me. I carry his voice with me wherever I go, not as an echo, but as a compass. Every decision, every challenge, every moment of doubt, I hear him. His wisdom was not in grand speeches, but in simple acts, quiet strength, and deep compassion. The greatest inheritance I received was not money or land. It was his way of thinking, his view of the world, and the light he left behind. And now I share it not just to honor him, but to ensure that his story continues to guide others. Because in the end, the wisdom of a life well lived becomes the torch that lights the path for those who follow. Even after my grandfather passed, it was as if his presence never truly left. His wisdom lingered in the cracks of the wooden floorboards where we used to sit and talk. It whispered through the creaking of the old rocking chair that still sat in the corner. I found myself hearing his voice in my own thoughts when life would throw me into a storm. He had once said, "When the winds are strongest, the roots must be deepest." And those words would ground me every time I felt like giving up. He had an unshakable faith in doing the right thing even when it was difficult. "The path of truth is not crowded," he often said. "Most people take the shortcut, but shortcuts often miss the view and the lesson." I remember once I was offered an easy way out of a responsibility, something that wouldn't harm anyone, but wouldn't be right either. I hesitated, thinking of my comfort, but I could see him in my mind shaking his head gently, not in anger, but in disappointment. I chose the hard way, the honest way, and though it cost me time and effort, I gained peace. And that, I learned from him, is the greatest currency of all. He believed that respect was earned not by demanding it, but by deserving it. "Speak less, do more," he used to say. "Let your life be your loudest voice." He never interrupted others to prove his point. He listened, observed, and responded only when it added value. He taught me that wisdom isn't about how much you know, but how much you understand and how deeply you live by what you know. One winter evening, I came home frustrated, complaining about how unfair life felt, how others had more, did less, and still seemed happier. He looked up from his quiet cup of tea and said something I'll never forget. "Comparison is the thief of joy. Count your blessings, not your neighbors." That moment opened my eyes. I started noticing the quiet gifts in my life: a healthy body, a loving family, a roof over my head, a heart capable of kindness. He taught me that gratitude wasn't a reaction to abundance, but a discipline, a habit, a way of seeing. When I asked him about aging and death, he was never afraid to talk about it. He said, "A full life makes peace with its ending. Don't fear the end, fear not having lived." And he meant it. He woke up every morning like life owed him nothing, and he owed life everything. He once said that time is the only wealth you cannot earn more of. So spend it wisely, he'd say. Don't waste it trying to be someone else. Be a masterpiece of your own making. He had a deep belief that people should build, not break, that every word you speak either heals or harms. Be careful with your tongue, he warned, because a single sentence can stay in someone's heart forever, for better or worse. I remember seeing him help a child who had broken a window accidentally. Instead of scolding him, my grandfather knelt down, smiled, and said, "It's all right. Mistakes are how we grow, not how we're defined." That boy grew up to become a kind man, always citing my grandfather as the first adult who made him feel seen rather than shamed. He showed me that compassion is the greatest form of strength. You can't control how others treat you, he said, but you can control whether you respond with poison or peace. He taught me to pause before reacting, to breathe before judging, and to walk in another's shoes before assuming I understand their path. He once told me, "People often confuse kindness with weakness, but kindness is the armor of those who've survived the hardest battles without losing their soul." He believed that the best leaders were servants first. He never chased titles or recognition. Instead, he focused on impact. Whether he was helping a neighbor fix a roof or comforting a grieving friend, he was always present, fully there. That's another lesson I learned. Presence is the most valuable gift you can give someone. Don't just be in the room, he said, be in the moment. He lived his life like it was art, not something to be rushed or perfected, but something to be deeply felt. He wrote letters to his friends even in his final years, thanking them for memories, for love, for time. When I asked why he still wrote by hand in the era of phones and emails, he said, "Because writing forces you to slow down and think, and some emotions deserve that slowness." That taught me that not everything needs to be instant. Some of the most meaningful things in life require patience, reflection, and intentionality. He had a drawer full of small items, old coins, worn-out tools, pictures, dried flowers, letters, even a broken watch. I once asked why he kept all these useless things. He smiled and said, "They're not useless. Each one carries a memory, and memory is the soil from which wisdom grows." He kept stories alive through objects, and through those stories, he kept people alive too. He never saw life as a straight line. He said it was more like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, always moving, always shaping its surroundings. He encouraged me to embrace change, not fear it. "Still water grows stale," he said. "Let life move you and move with it." Even his flaws were lessons. He admitted when he was wrong, apologized when he hurt someone, and forgave those who wronged him. "You don't lose anything by saying sorry," he taught me. "You gain your peace back." That humility, real, raw, and rare, is something I've carried into every relationship. He lived in the same house for over 50 years. Not because he couldn't move, but because he believed in roots. When you plant yourself in one place, you learn to grow deeper instead of wider. That house, with its creaky floors and weathered walls, became the soil where I learned how to be a human being. He never judged people by their status or success. He looked at how they treated others, especially those who couldn't offer them anything in return. "Character is who you are when no one's watching," he'd whisper. That simple idea has guided my every moral decision. On his final birthday, he didn't want gifts. He asked everyone to write him a letter, just one lesson they learned from him. We gathered around him and read those letters aloud. He listened with teary eyes, not out of pride, but from overwhelming gratitude. "I didn't know I mattered this much," he said softly. That night I realized, we must tell people what they mean to us while they're still here. After he was gone, the neighborhood changed. The garden he tended grew wild. The rocking chair gathered dust. But the legacy he left was eternal. His life, though simple, had carved deep paths in the hearts of many. I often think about how many lives he touched just by being himself. No stage, no spotlight, just a life of integrity, love, wisdom, and presence. Now as I grow older, I find myself repeating his words, his habits, even his gestures. I find myself becoming a reflection of the man who shaped my soul. And if I can pass even a fraction of his wisdom to my children, I will have lived a meaningful life. Because in the end, the greatest tribute to those who came before us is to live in a way that honors their legacy. My grandfather always said, when you die, people won't remember your job title, your car, or your bank balance. They'll remember how you made them feel. So live to be remembered not for what you had, but for who you were. And that, above all, is the wisdom that continues to guide me through every storm, every joy, every silence, and every step forward.